Okay, everyone, welcome back to another episode of ICU. Today, we're doing something a little different. I have one of my clients with me, and we're going to chat about her experience, her IC journey, talk through, what her experience in my Road to Remission program was like and how she's doing now, and maybe even a couple other things. So this is Amy. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Hello.
This is Amy's first podcast, and last week we did, or 2 weeks ago, we did our first Instagram live. So we're doing some stuff here.
Doing up.
So, can you give the listeners a little background on you, where you live, and maybe the beginning stages of your IC, and then we can kind of go into it from there.
Sure. Okay, so I'm Amy and I live in Maryland. And I've had diagnosed IC probably since 2020, so a couple of years, but I've had bladder issues off and on my entire life. And just finally formally got diagnosed in 2020. And I think that's about it.
Okay. Can you talk about what your symptoms specifically were?
So most of my symptoms were more pelvic pain, because I also have pelvic floor dysfunction. I had a lot of pelvic pain when I sit and doing too much when I ovulate, all of that. And then in 2020, it got so bad that then I started having the burning. When I would go to the bathroom, I would have burning pain, and I knew that wasn't right. And so that's when I sought the doctor, because I'd already been dealing with physical therapist, and this just seemed different. So that's when I went to the doctor, because I was having a lot of burning when I would go to the bathroom, as well as the pain. Constant.
And did you have UTI tests that were coming back negative?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was how I was when I was growing up, when I was little, with bladder problems. All my tests, I'm pretty sure I had, when I was 3, a cystoscopy, one of the, that word.
Cystoscopy?
Yeah, thank you. Because I just remember it was being very painful, and I was awake, and I was 3. And
oh, wow.
It was
that's
horrendous.
So young to have a procedure like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was that. It was very similar. I just remember they telling my parents it was going to be bad, to where my father left the room because he couldn't handle it. And and everything came out fine. And so off and on my whole childhood, I had felt like UTI symptoms, but nothing was ever done about it or diagnosed. And then it kind of went away for a while, until I was in like college age, and every once in a while I would have like issues, and then it would go, but nothing ever, no positive UTIs ever.
Mm-hmm. And when you were going through those symptoms, did you kind of experiment with ways to like soothe your symptoms? Did you figure anything out? Like, I'm asking that because when I was a kid, I knew that putting a cold water bottle between my legs like would help me.
Usually it was, for me, it was, I always kind of just laid down, would rest, or drink lots of water. My mother was always like, drink lots of water. I was like, okay. I just had to go to the bathroom, but
my mom also said that. Every time I would be like, Mom, I just like don't feel well, or I feel tired. She'd be like, well, are you dehydrated? You should drink some water. And I'm like, you know what? That was a good tip. As annoying as it was. And
yes.
Another thing she used to do was I'd be so hungry for dinner after school, and she'd be like, just drink some water. I'm like, oh my gosh, that does not do the trick, Mom.
No, it doesn't. No.
Oh man. So the diagnostic process, like what did that look like for you? Did you have any sort of struggles, any, medical gaslighting, anything like that?
Actually, no, because when I had some issues getting diagnosed with pelvic floor dysfunction. When the pain started, it took a while for them to figure out. I had to go through the whole, all kinds of scans, MRIs, all of that, because I had very specific pain in one specific area. Nothing was ever found. Nothing was ever found. But then a couple of years later, when it got bad again, I saw the physical therapist. She got me to doing pretty good, not fantastic, but pretty good, much better than I was. But then in 2020, I had terrible stress in my life. You know, my husband got diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and I started not feeling well. That's when the pelvic pain then started turning to bladder problems. And I was like, okay, this isn't right. So when I went in, I was like, okay, I'll see my doctor, my general doctor. And thankfully, my general doctor is married to a urologist. They're in the same office. So she was like, okay, you're in the right office. Just need to see my husband. So she was able to get me, or they had they had a nurse practitioner, somebody, they referred me quickly. And thankfully I was just hopped over into the other room. And so they actually diagnosed me that day, because they looked at me and, you know, they tested the urine, had me do the urine sample, nothing came up. But then they did one of those, I don't know what it's called. It's where they measure how much urine is still in your bladder.
Was it like an ultrasound, or was it?
Yes, I think it was maybe kind of like not your typical, like you would have with the baby, but it was, yeah, it was like a gel on your, and I was not emptied, like, and I had just gone to the bathroom. And so my pelvic floor muscles were so tight that they had to use a catheter to get everything out. And so when the doctor came and saw me, she was like, you have IC, because this, and I thought that was kind of strange. I'm like, well, I've never heard of that. And actually, she never told me what it was called. She, because I had to ask her like the next visit, what exactly is this called again? She just gave me the list of paper. Yeah, the lovely list, that paper, you know, that dreaded paper that says you cannot have this.
Yep.
All the same day that my husband got diagnosed with Parkinson's. It was a fantastic day. And I'm like, wait, what? I can't have coffee?
Oh man, what are the chances that happens on the same day?
That is, I know, it's crazy. I just kind of looked at her like, are you serious?
So what were you like feeling in that moment? I mean, were you overwhelmed? Were you feeling like glad that you had a name for what you were feeling?
I think it was a mixture. I was just kind of like, what in the world? And yes, I'm glad that there was a name, but they were so quick with everything. Seemed like it was such a big diagnosis, especially once I got home and researched it more. It seemed like it was such a big diagnosis for such a quick amount of, here, you have this. But it all makes sense. And
right. It's interesting that it did happen that quickly. I mean, I know doctors are very different, and you know, maybe this doctor was more familiar with IC and she felt comfortable diagnosing you. I know there's doctors out there that aren't comfortable giving that diagnosis until you have a cystoscopy. And did she want to do a cystoscopy with you?
No.
Okay. Did she give you a reason?
No, I didn't even know that was a thing until I started reading more about it.
I mean, based on what I know about you, it doesn't feel like it would show anything. I feel like your bladder would probably look like mine did and be completely normal,
right.
Based on, you know, the fact that stress is one of your biggest triggers, which we'll talk about. But then what happened after that? Like what happened between then and like when you started working with me? Were you struggling at all? Were you having success with anything?
So the first step that she did was that day when she diagnosed me, she sent me home with the paper. She also was adamant that I start taking L-arginine. That was on like the protocol, that I want you to take this and stay away from these foods. And so I thought that was a forever thing. And then because my bladder or my pelvic floor was so tight, like they could barely get the catheter in to use the catheter to empty me. She's like, I'm going to give you a medication, because she said, you're so tight. You like so tight, which I knew that I could feel it. So she put me on an antispasmodic medicine. So that was step one. And that really started to help. It took about 3 weeks for it to really start to fully work. And that started to help. But I still was having every month, every month I was still having problems, like constantly having flares of pain. And then what brought me to you was this summer I got COVID. And right after COVID, I got the worst flare ever, and nothing worked. I had already been 2 years on this elimination diet, didn't know it was an elimination diet. I just knew that it was stay away from all of these things.
As like so many people think.
Yes.
I just got done filming a TikTok video kind of talking about this topic. Like we are led to think that it is a forever thing, and that's because doctors aren't doing a full education on what you're supposed to be doing. I don't even know that they're, sure about what people should be doing. They just know that they have this handout and they give it to you, and, good intentions from them to help you. But so many people are in your situation, like getting stuck in that, we call it the elimination phase of the elimination diet, because essentially you're following the IC diet, which is restrictive in nature. And it wasn't designed to be followed long-term because of that restriction. It can lead to, weight changes, nutrient deficiencies, and a poor relationship with food. I see so many people that are terrified of eating, or they eat the same 10 foods every single day. And it's like, they're terrified to add anything else into their regimen. And so then food just becomes like the enemy. Do you feel like you had like an element of that?
Absolutely. Because like I said, at this point, I had gone about 2 years of not having anything on that diet, which is extremely limiting. And then because I still wasn't really getting great relief from that, I still was having a lot of pain, was my biggest issue. I did more research, and then you go down that whole Google rabbit hole, and so I ended up, in a nutshell, I ended up being gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, and then all the things on the IC diet for 2 years. Don't recommend it, because then I'm losing hair and all kinds of things. And then I was scared of food, scared of eating. I didn't stop going out to eat, stopped going to family gatherings. When I do things at church, I just wouldn't participate in the food. And it was just very depressing, very stressful.
Yeah, it can significantly reduce your quality of life. I don't think
definitely.
a lot of people understand the role that food plays in our lives until they are handed a diet list like the IC diet. It's like everywhere you go, there's foods, there's alcohol, there's, things that you're not supposed to have with IC. And it's like navigating that is just incredibly difficult. And if you're already afraid of those things, you may not even want to go put yourself in that situation.
It's too complicated. You had to explain everything to people, and people didn't understand, because it is a complicated thing to try to explain to me, and a very personal thing. You don't want to tell people that, it hurts really bad down there.
It's such a taboo topic.
Yeah. It's just not exactly something you bring up at the dinner table.
Yeah.
So you would just avoid things. So that's how my quality of life was terrible. And it was very complicating when you're a mom and you're cooking for a whole family of 5, trying to cook and provide for them while you're on a super restrictive diet. Just made it very complicated. So when I finally heard about you, I was just in a state of constant pain. I had been in a flare for about 6 months and just afraid to eat, just a hot mess. That's just all I can say.
And did you see any light at the end of the tunnel?
No, because I was under the assumption that those foods had to be out of my diet permanently, because nobody tells you until you start doing your own research. And I somehow stumbled upon you in Facebook, thank God. And praise the Lord. And and then you started talking about, no, you shouldn't be limiting this. It's too restricting. I'm like, wait, what? I'm not supposed to limit this forever?
Yeah, no, I see people in Facebook support groups talking about like what diet works for them. And people are like, yeah, keto works for me or low oxalate works for me. And then all of a sudden you start layering on all of these
Yes.
restrictions like you did. And it's so difficult to live like a fulfilling life like that. It's like food is just so, what am I trying to say? Like an integral part of life.
Ingrained in our lives. It
Yes.
is.
And so if it basically our motto in what I do is, work to identify what you are uniquely sensitive to, because we all have different diet sensitivities. Some
Right.
people have a ton of diet sensitivity. So maybe that would be somebody with Hunter's lesions. Some people have moderate amount, maybe like 4 or 5 things. And then other people have no diet sensitivity.
Mhm.
Like it's just such a spectrum. And the only way to truly figure that out is to conduct an elimination diet. And that's, what we do in Road to Remission. And I do want to talk a little bit about how you got into the program, and then we can talk about your experience in the program. So you initially started with the IC Collective, which is my monthly membership.
Right.
So what was your experience in that? And then what led you to take the jump to join Road to Remission?
Well, my theory was Road to Remission looked like an excellent program. And I had a registered dietitian friend tell me that. I had her look at it, and she said, because I went to her thinking, once I heard on Facebook that from you that, hey, you really need to do the complete elimination diet. And I've done an elimination diet before, so I was familiar with what that was. I had to do that for migraines. But I knew that it's a complicated thing, and it's easier to do it with somebody. So I went to her thinking she's a registered dietitian, but she was like, I'd never heard of interstitial cystitis. And she was like, I love you and I want to help you, but I can't help you because I know nothing. Like she specialized.
Right. No, they don't teach us about that in school.
Right. So she was like, if you had diabetes, I'm your girl. But but I said, well, I found this program. I said, could you look at it for me? I said, you're a dietitian. You would know if it looked like it was a good deal. I said, I have no clue how much dietitians get paid. So she explained to me, she looked at it and she's like, this is actually a really good deal. Like you're getting a lot for your money. She was like, trust me on that. And I said, okay. I said, I don't know anything about this lady. I said, she has the IC Collective. I said, I can try that for a couple months. If I like the way she teaches, then maybe I'll go for it and do the whole thing. So that's the way I kind of went into it, thinking I was probably going to graduate to remission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had a few people do that as well. And I think that's totally fair. You want to dip your toe in before taking the full jump. But yeah, after a few months you did that. And then going into Road to Remission, did you have feelings of, anxiety? Were you nervous about doing the whole elimination diet process, or did everything kind of go smoothly?
I think it went smoothly. I didn't get to mention that I actually really liked the collective. And once I saw how you taught, that's what made me want to think about doing Road to Remission, because all your education things are done fantastically, way better than Dr. Google.
That makes me feel so good about myself, because I have always thought that I'm not a good teacher. And so the fact that you're saying this to me, like I'm blushing right now. Thank you.
Yes, you're definitely a good teacher. So once I saw that, and you were quick to respond to me and to my questions and things like that, I knew that you would be a great one to work with. So then at that point, I wasn't nervous. I was actually pretty excited to just start, because once I make a decision, I go all in. This is how I am.
I love that. I don't think everybody is like that, but I think people that have that mindset and those tendencies are like kind of set themselves up for success, because you're going to do everything exactly as we designed it in the program. And you're going to, like, you've come to almost every single support call that we have offered. And I think that has done so much for you.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the program, we guide you through the elimination diet. So
Mhm.
what did you think you were sensitive to versus what did you find out that you were actually sensitive to?
I thought I was going to be sensitive to everything because I had been in what we call the elimination phase or such a limited diet for 2 years and still not getting relief. I was just like, everything. I'm sensitive to everything. I just was convinced that I was sensitive to everything since I was not getting relief. And at this point in my IC journey, I thought that food was the only puzzle piece because they don't talk about, that's the only thing they talk about at your doctor's. That's the only thing they really help you with. Well, help you sort of give you that piece of paper.
Mhm.
So I thought I was going to be sensitive to everything.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that. I think it's really easy to latch on to food
Mhm.
as being the culprit for your symptoms because it's the obvious thing. You eat at least 3 times a day, it's easy to say like I'm flaring today, like was it whatever I ate for dinner last night? It has to be that. And I see a lot of people just jumping to that conclusion.
Yeah.
And so I usually challenge people by saying like, okay, let's just make sure it's not something else that is not diet related. So were you really stressed yesterday or the day before, or even the day before that? Stress can affect you for a few days
Mhm.
and hormones, we want to make sure you're not flaring at the same time every single month. We want to make sure your allergies aren't acting up, like your environmental allergies, because that could be a mast cell or histamine issue. We want to just take everything into account and not just overlook all of these other factors and just blame it on food because that's the easiest thing. I think once you start to open your eyes to those other factors, that's when the game kind of changes. And I feel like that happened with you.
Yes, definitely. Because
Mhm.
I think, yeah, one of your classes, I can't remember which one it is, when it starts talking about the different triggers. Am
Mhm.
I remembering that? Was that from IC Collective or was that from Road to Remission?
Was it talking about flares?
Was it talking about flares or something? Just that it's not just food.
Flu. Yeah, I don't know what class that was. I have so many classes. It's hard to
Yeah,
keep
but
track.
it talks about that, and you talked about the different triggers, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute, you mean there's other triggers besides food? Huh. Hmm.
Yeah.
Because my mother had, and I love my mother to death, but she was like, I'm telling you, Amy, it's not food. I guarantee you it's not food. You have the most stressful life of anybody I know. Your husband just got diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. You have a son with special needs. I mean, she was like, you have a busy, stressful life. I bet you that it's stress. And I was like, what? No, it's the food. It's not the stress.
Right? I'm kind of surprised you didn't also end up with like an IBS or something similar.
I do think I have some of those issues.
Yeah, they typically do overlap, especially if stress is like the common denominator.
Yeah.
So you found out that stress is a big trigger for you. How have you been working to minimize that stress?
Oh, that's a hard one. Because thought about, my first thought was I would just go send myself on a vacation by myself for like 3 months. Wouldn't that be a great idea? But
If only.
just to get everything calmed down. But that's not realistic. So I started just you had a class on meditation, so I started trying meditation, doing breathing exercises. The big thing is when I went into Road to Remission, I did tell myself I was going to take the 3 months, and this was going to be my focus, that I was going to focus on me. I was going to get my health under control. So I basically cleared my schedule and made sure I didn't plan anything outside, which obviously significantly lowers your stress.
Mm-hmm.
When you know trying to be 5 different people, when you're one person, that significantly lowered my stress. So then I started to feel better pretty quickly once I did that and started focusing on not stressing, deep breaths. I started walking every day because that's also when I would pray. That's my prayer time, which also calms me. And I just tried and started doing a lot of things like that. I am always doing art. So I made a focus of doing like art journaling, which is very helpful for me. That lowers my stress level. Anything that calms me down, listening to music, all of those types of calm music. Let me classical.
Not rock music.
No, that gets me all. No.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Did you ever use Curable? I feel like you did.
I think I looked into it and I could never figure it out. Like
Okay.
I figured out the free stuff and then I just couldn't figure it out. But yeah, I just looked up on YouTube.
Finding something that works for you is really the most important thing. Curable, for those of you listening who have never heard of it, it's an app that has a collection of, learning opportunities to teach you about your nervous system, how to rewire your brain, how to just get more in tuned with your body. And it's a really helpful app, and they do have a free version. So that could be a great place to start. And also another really great one is Pelvic Sense, which we had Evelyn Hecht, who created it. She was on the podcast in season 1, and she has another really great program as well that I can link in the show notes. But yeah, like I said, it's all about finding what works best for you based on your lifestyle and just what you prefer. So stress is a big one for you. What else is a big trigger for you?
Hormones. It's since you encourage tracking everything, that's a big thing, to track everything.
It is.
Started tracking, not only did I start tracking my food, but I started tracking my stress levels, and I started tracking my period, which I had always tracked, but I kind of linked it all together. And I started noticing that I would flare every time I ovulated, every time. And also I start flaring right after my period. Like I start getting sore. And then once I ovulate, it gets worse.
Are your flares from hormones different than your flares from stress? Have you noticed?
Yes. Yes and no. They're kind of very similar, I think.
Gotcha. I'm just curious because I know I have different types of flares, and stress flares are typically the worst. And then like a hormonal flare is more of like a low burn for me. It's just kind of there, but it's a little milder. And then stress, it's like intense blazing fire for like 30 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting.
My stress flares are the worst, and the hormone ones are more like just a constant ache. Like I ache, and that's the only way I can describe it. I just feel more sore when I sit and that kind of things. But then when it passes, I feel great.
And sitting is another big one for you, right?
Yeah, sitting is a big thing.
Yeah, we've been talking on
pudendal neuralgia. I said it. Woohoo! I said that, pudendal neuralgia. I'm going to look into that because I have a feeling that I have issues with that.
Yeah. On our group calls recently, we've been talking with a few members about pudendal neuralgia and how that could be causing a lot of people's pain and other symptoms. So if you're someone who, I mean, Amy, what can you describe like what you feel that leads you to think of that it could be pudendal neuralgia?
To not be too much information, but when I do when I do my pelvic floor exercises, I do an internal massage that my pelvic floor therapist taught me using a pelvic wand, which is awesome and it's very helpful. But during the certain times, it's almost like I hit a nerve, and it's like it'll send me through the roof, and it'll be so painful. But then once I work on it a little bit, it eases up. And so that's what I'm kind of thinking. And also it gets very aggravated when I sit for a long time, and sometimes it'll make my, leg or my butt numb on one side, and it's always on one side. My pain is always on one side. So that's why and because I had pelvic floor dysfunction and I had 2 pretty traumatic deliveries of 2 10-pound babies, I'm pretty sure
Those are
there's
some
something going
big
on.
babies.
Yes. Something's going on down there. It's not-
Oh, yeah. So I think that is potentially another missing piece of your puzzle to look into. Was there anything else that you learned was a trigger for you?
Yes, tight pants.
Ugh,
Tight pants and underwear.
if only we could tolerate those things.
I know. Yes.
Like-
And I never thought about that until I had read one of your blog posts, and you talked about having the loose pants. And I was like, I, for years, always only wore leggings or skinny jeans. That was just, and so I was like, let me try. And as soon as I stopped doing that, it was like so much different. I was like, oh, wow, this feels so much better.
This feels wonderful.
I know.
So yeah, it for you, I think there's a lot of triggers that may not, by themselves be the one thing that pushed you over the edge. But I think the combination of things is what led to your symptoms being, so bad at the point where you kind of found me. So where are you at now in terms of your symptoms?
I'm doing pretty good. I have finished the elimination diet and found that I was only sensitive to like 2 things. Like, what?
Crazy. And how much have you added back in?
A lot. Like, I've added at least 20 things back in.
That's so many things.
I know. And I still have a few things that I want to eventually test. It's a few like spices like paprika and some spicier things that I would like to try that I decided I didn't need to do right away before I started adding everything back in. I'm going to be brave and try those things because I've done so well so far. So I'm so much better. I would probably consider myself in remission because if you go into the definition of remission being my symptoms are a lot less and I know exactly when they're going to flare. And when I do flare, I know how to handle it now. So to me, I would think that
that's amazing. Oh my gosh. That's really interesting that, and I did a whole episode on like what remission means to everyone, but like, it's funny because your definition and my definition are different, but we're kind of in the same boat where our symptoms are minimized. We know our triggers, we know how to manage them. But you consider yourself in remission and I do not. So it just goes to show that everybody is so different. And it's important if somebody says that they're in remission, you ask them, well, what does remission mean to you? Because I think it's easy to kind of hear that from someone and feel a little crappy about yourself that you're not in remission. Have you ever experienced that?
Yes. Well, if you look at it, if remission is it's completely gone, I don't know if anybody with IC could say that because there's no cure, correct?
Right.
So if you think it's just going to magically go away, it's not. But when you do have why I consider myself in remission, because I don't panic anymore. If I start feeling a flare come on, I know how to handle it. And I typically only have a flare like maybe once a month, couple days, like maybe a week in a month where I don't feel great, but it's not to the level that I was at. So I consider from where I came from way, way better than I was. Way better than I was.
That's so great. And I know that you're able to do things that you couldn't before. Like you recently went out on a date night with your husband and like, what did you do?
Well, I didn't even care about scouring the menu to check every ingredient. I just ordered what I wanted to order. And then afterwards, we used to always on date nights, we would either go on a coffee date, which was our favorite thing to do. And I went on one of those, yay.
Yay.
And then or we would do like ice cream dessert afterwards. And so I actually had chocolate gelato at a chocolate shop, and for 2 years I stayed away from all of that. So it was very exciting, and I didn't have any issues, no problems.
That's amazing.
I know.
Like, I'm so happy for you.
Yes, me too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, from 3 months ago to now, it's like you're a completely different person, and it's like you have so much like spark in you now, and it's amazing to see that transformation.
Yes, I'm very grateful for this program, because I was not in good shape at the beginning.
Yeah. And I mean, it's great that you did take action and at least get yourself into the IC collective. I mean, what do you think would have happened if you hadn't joined and just kind of pushed it off?
I would still be suffering. I would still be eating the same 10 foods forever and being sad.
Yeah.
And not doing things that I want to do.
Yeah. I had a thought, and of course it escaped me. Typical.
Well, I think living like that too, you get very depressed by being so limited. And I think that brings on the stress. So when you think about all the things you can't do and all the food you can't eat, it's very stressful and very depressing. Once you finally get past that and say, okay, we're going to be brave and we're going to try these things and we're going to just focus on me. And then once you change that mindset, that was a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when it started to get better.
Yeah. So a lot of our clients actually end up saving money long term because of how much better they get in the 3-month period. Do you feel like you are in that same boat?
Definitely, because I had done a few installations, which I did not like. And I know those are costly. And also just, I was on a lot of supplements that I felt like I needed. And I'm actually at a point where I think I could even go down even more. So definitely, because I would try everything. I would try all the supplements that people would suggest. And, that's costly. So yeah, I definitely think you save in the long run.
I see that happening with a lot of people, just throwing a ton of like supplements and medications at your symptoms and not knowing what's helping you and what you're wasting your money on. And so we also try to help you guys with that in the program, kind of stripping it down and then testing those in the reintroduction phase of the diet. So it does end up like kind of saving you once you know exactly what does help you versus what doesn't. So one more thing I wanted to talk to you about was the support piece of Road to Remission. So not me or Beverly, our support dietitian, but the other members of the community and our support calls. Like, what are your thoughts on all of that?
I think that the support group is amazing. Everybody is amazing. And it's one of those places where you feel safe. You feel like you can cry if you need to cry. You can talk about very intimate things that you need to talk about, and nobody judges you, and everybody listens, and everybody has compassion because they're going through what you're going through. And, when you have this condition, you feel very alone, because I don't know anybody in my personal friend group or anything. I don't know anybody who has interstitial cystitis. So you feel like the odd person, like the weirdo of the group. And then you go to the support group and everybody has it. And everybody is, I learned so much, not just from you and Beverly, but from them, because they have things that they've tried, or everybody is so different, have other conditions. Some people have pelvic floor problems like I do. And so you can ask each other different things, and you learn so much, and just the support is so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think last night's call was really helpful because we had one of our more veteran Road to Remission member.
Yes.
She's been with us for over a year and a half now, and she has both pudendal neuralgia and endometriosis. And I think
Yeah.
it was really great because the newer members
Right.
were able to ask her questions about her experiences. Because a lot of people, like we said earlier, are suspecting that they might have pudendal neuralgia and or endometriosis. So it's great to ask people about their experiences, and
Yes.
that can be like one piece of information you pick up from one of those calls is it could be the game changer.
It is. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I love those calls. I think that you guys build relationships that
Yes.
just are really cool. I love seeing the support people give one another. I mean, if someone gets emotional, everybody is just quick to be like, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Here's, some suggestions that could potentially help you. Like, it's so cool to see.
Yes.
I got lucky with all of you guys.
Yes, I know. 'Cause we're all
You are truly. I look forward to those calls. We have fun, and we are not always like serious and like, talking about things. Like the other night we were talking about the weirdest thing that we've stained with azo or peridium. Like
yes.
we
Yes.
also were talking about something last night too that we were all laughing about, but I don't remember what it was.
Who knows? Could be.
Oh man, I wish I could remember because it was really funny. It's gonna come to me right when I hit stop recording, but that's okay. I'll share it on my Instagram story if I think about it.
Right.
Oh man. Well, Amy, is there anything else that you want to share related to your journey or anything?
All I would say that if you decide to commit to this program, which I 100% recommend, then you need to give it your all. Like it takes work. It takes work. I mean, it's not something that you can just show up and you're all of a sudden going to be better. You've got to follow exactly what Callie and Beverly tell you to do. Watch all of the videos. I mean, I'm one of those binge watchers, so I watch all of them before I like get into it because I want to like know all the information first, and that's super helpful. And I highly recommend doing that. But also do it exactly as you say. Like follow it. Trust you that I trusted you that you knew what you were doing, which you do, and just follow it. And I think that's why I got success as quickly as I did, because I went all in. But that's just my personality, that if I'm going to pay for something like that, I'm going to do it 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's beneficial, and to track everything and to do what they suggest. And yes, that's my recommendation.
I completely agree. Full transparency, like we've had people come through the program who weren't as committed and they didn't do the program as we designed, and they don't get the results that someone like you has gotten. And so I completely agree. If someone's on the fence, just make sure you're in a place where you can dedicate 3 months to the process. You can do your very best to track every day. I mean, we don't expect you to be perfect. But just giving 100% effort, and the transformation will happen, and you can get relief in 3-ish months.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I started seeing relief quite quickly. I would say probably within the first month I started feeling a lot better, just because the stress of the stress was released once I had a plan in place.
Yeah, you didn't have to do it alone anymore.
Yes, and had the support.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, this was a really fun conversation.
I liked it.
Thank you so much, Amy, for coming on and sharing your story and your experiences in Road to Remission. If anybody's interested in applying for Road to Remission, I will put the link to apply in the show notes. And, you all are welcome to send me a DM on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, wherever you want, and we can chat more about whether it's a good fit for you. Other than that, that's it. Thank you again, Amy, for coming on, and I'll talk to the rest of you next week.
Okay.